You're listening to Live Wild Radio, the part-time adventure podcast.
Join us as we explore how outdoor adventures build mind, body, and spirit. Hey guys, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Really good.
Welcome to Live Wild Radio, and today we're going to be, we have our guest, Alison Gaudet. Hi, Allison.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. And Allison's actually my physiotherapist. She is with the Grand River Sports Medicine Clinic. And in fact, I've been with them for quite a while. A lot of you know that I have stage 4 osteoarthritis in my knees. And I've been dealing with the past 2 years to lose weight, increase my strength. I've had orthotics, braces. I've even done stem cell therapy 8 months ago.
Yep. Whoever at Grand River is saving up for a boat, Catherine's paying for it.
Yeah, exactly. And more recently, I just announced being on the keto diet for 2 months, and I have noticed significant gains with all of those. But I think what's really important here is the bit about injury prevention, and that's why Allison's on here today, and she's fantastic. So before I give away too much, Allison, tell us what you do, okay. And to set this record
you
straight.
Said do.
I did have a few drinks tonight.
Yeah.
So I'm a physiotherapist at Grand River Sports Medicine Center. I have been there almost 2 months or 2 years. I've been back to Ontario. Before that, I was in Alberta and did essentially sports physiotherapy there. So it's all orthopedic MSK stuff.
Okay.
We really focus on sport injury rehab, sport performance, activity, kind of training the full athlete, and athletes being from like our high level performance athletes, nationally ranked, and everyone where I have, 79-year-old guys who come in who are downhill skiing, so our athletes
cool.
range just from active individuals to all the way up into professional athletes kind of thing. So we work all alongside just keeping everybody active, keeping everyone in sport.
I love that because it's not just for the athletes that are doing it full-time professionally, but as long as you've got health coverage, then which everybody does here in Canada, we're very lucky with that. We can go and visit you guys and get the second opinion, because that's exactly what happened to me. My surgeon told me not to strength train, not to hike, not to squat, not to do a lot of things that I found quite beneficial, really.
I hate that. I really do hate that, and I'm not supposed to use that word unless I really mean it, but it's true. It's one of those things that frustrates me so much, because activity is what heals us. We just have to modify it. But to not do anything is probably the worst, most detrimental thing. Mm-hmm. Our bodies were never meant to be sedentary. We were never meant to sit behind a desk for 8 hours a day. We were totally hunters and gatherers and foragers, and that's what our bodies were always meant to do. And so to say don't do anything, it just means change how you're doing, or maybe strengthen differently from what you are. Or maybe we don't have a baseline strength, but there's always something we can do.
And I think I took that seriously because both of my mother in particular is about 74, and seeing her go through, aging. She's lost a lot of mobility, and if you don't use it, you absolutely will lose it.
Yeah.
I've seen people in the hospital because of cancer treatments, but even just lying in that bed for a month or two is enough to lose that muscle mass. And so I think that really shocked me into taking care of myself. And so anyways, that's why we're really excited to have you today. I know that in the past, I thought this was interesting, you worked with some of the military.
I did.
Yeah, talk about that.
I was very fortunate, actually, as a student. So I went out to Alberta and did my first physio degree out there. And my last placement was at the military base. And it was in, I think, 2008. And I got to work there. But then a few years later after that, I got offered a full-time position as a civilian physio on the military base. And it was something so special. So fortunate to work with incredible human beings as my colleagues, and then our serving members. So they were wonderful. Just such amazing experiences and injuries like you've never seen, and just opportunities that these incredible human beings. It was an absolute privilege and got my eyes opened a lot.
Now that actually gets me interested in something, because short of like the going around and shooting people part, A lot of what the military does is what we do, right? They hike long distances with weight on their back.
Absolutely.
And my guess, if I'm not mistaken, you probably run into a lot of overuse injuries because they're carting around. Like, in backpacking, we always talk about, really focus on get the weight of your gear down. Well, if you're in the military, you got what you got, right? Everything's overbuilt so it doesn't break.
Yeah.
Right. And they're carrying guns and bulletproof vests and helmets and, all this kind of shit. So it's not unusual for somebody to be humping around 70 pounds on their back.
They're humping 80 to 120 pounds on some of their extreme expeditions where they are out there for days on end, and some of the training is such that they are sleepless for days on end, or they may allow them 90 minutes of sleep and then wake them up and then have to go into these extreme conditions. And so some of the injuries are extravagant and substantial, and they're so sleep deprived, but yet they're carrying these weights. And so I've learned so much by my biomechanics or my lifting strategies or my fitting strategies because these guys have to be in, you have to maximize every potential you have possible, because you don't have a choice. They do have to carry 120 pounds on their back, and some of them might be $120, $140, because some of our special service guys where we need them to be in smaller situations, or some of our guys that are coming out of the planes can't be 220 pounds or 240 pounds. We need them to be small operators. They have to still be able to carry the same amount of gear. They don't get to carry less gear because they weigh less, so we have to kind of finesse their physicality and their performance, essentially.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the fascinating things about, everybody thinks, because everybody's watching movies, it's always some giant jacked dude. Mm-mm. The more special forces you get, generally the more they start looking like
civilians.
No, like endurance athletes.
They're stealth-like. They're like little bulldogs. They're little pit bulls. They're little, just can move on a dime, but they're ripped, but they just can. Their explosiveness and their training is something so special.
And then because so many of the things are. There's bits of having to be, fast with long sessions of just humping for days to get there. Especially anybody that served in Afghanistan. If you're out on patrol, you're in the fucking mountains, right? It's rough, gnarly terrain. You're at high altitude, and you're, unlike any mountaineer who would, have all high-end gear and it's lightweight and you're, maximizing, or minimizing the weight you're carrying. They again still just have the whatever there is. If you're sort of a special forces-y kind of guy, then you get a little bit more leeway on what gear you get to pick. They're the ones with the camouflage Arc'teryx gear, the Arc'teryx Leaf line, law enforcement, and armed forces. When I first saw they did a thing called Leaf, it's like, oh, that's kind of and then I looked into what it is. It's like, oh, they're doing camo Gore-Tex. So yeah, it's a kind of a fascinating thing because they need to have the performance of an elite athlete then with this whole other skill set.
They call them tactical athletes.
Yeah.
And that's truly how they train. It's their job to be athletes, but just in such a different facet, mentally and physically, right? So not saying athletes don't have that mental aspect, but it doesn't have to be 24 hours a day for 8 months straight, right? So if their tour is 8 months long, sometimes they're out beyond the wire for that, a long stretch of that. They got to be on that whole time and then still performing with that much weight on or whatever they're doing.
So with that type of thing, because how do you sort of see a change in the way? Because it used to be they would just run everybody into the ground.
Yeah.
Now, is that changing where now, with a focus on training, but also a focus on recovery, like what we know in any other sports science avenue, Is that changing in the military?
It's fantastic how much it is changing, and that's what's so exciting. So I'd have some senior officers or some senior non-commissioned members come in and say when they were first, young privates or young training, they would have their senior officers up in front smoking while they're running in their combat boots with their rucksacks on. Now they know they will never in the desert, or they will never on exercise actually run with their packs on. It's just not a thing that actually happens. So why are we training that way? So their training has changed substantially. They don't let them run in combat boots anymore because we know how many injuries happen with that. They are putting a huge emphasis on performance, and they're putting a huge emphasis on sleep and nutrition and just kind of holistic approach. It's any national institute, so it's a little bit slower changing over time, and there is the gentleman's club of, well, we always did it this way, so we have to do it this way. But kind of the newer age coming up is really changing, a huge emphasis. They're not going on 10K and 15K and 20K runs anymore, because that's not realistic. That's not combat. That's not when it's troops in combat, that's not what's happening. They need the explosiveness, so they are doing kind of CrossFit type workouts, because that actually transfers more into the skill set that they need. And that's a huge change, because they would just run them. They used to go for like 100K rucks, 50K rucks. One of their even their exercise performance testing that they have to do year after year has changed from when it was in 2008. They were doing these sit-up and push-up tests, and then they had to go for this long kind of rucksack march under a certain time and do a body weight carry. Now they're doing a different force test where they have to do sandbag carries, and then they have to do different performance measures that actually matches more of their physical demands. And then there's different statuses that they have to reach, kind of thing, like different levels that they can get to. So they can get platinum status. And then there's only a few, like on the military base in Edmonton, where there was 2 infantry units, there's only a few guys that actually reach platinum status. So it's actually something that they hang their hat on, that they get really excited about when they match. But it was never like that. That's only changed in the last few years.
When you have something like that, then you get to shit talk everybody else.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it's very much sports specific training.
Yeah, they're getting better at it.
I'm hearing more and more is the same as what we should be doing as well. So before we dive into that, can you tell us how did you get into this? What is this, that what a part of what you do is what you love? Do you love?
It's kind of funny, because when you say, how did you get into this? It's just kind of what I do. And that's the exciting part. It's not independent. It's not one thing on its own. It's just kind of how I like to do my world, but then transfer it into physio as my everyday. And people always say, well, you get to wake up and, you get paid for your job. And I'm like, well, I just feel like I'm in a big playground, because it's how I've always lived my life, is just exercise and energy or health promotion and trying to be active and physically fit. And then I kind of found a world that I get to do that every day. And then I get to teach people how to do that every day, and trying to kind of integrate it into their world. And so instead of making it something separate and different, it's just kind of been my goal is to make sure it's just integrated into the life, and it's a lifestyle.
Nice.
And that's always been my lifestyle. Like from high school is kind of when I decided I'm going to do sports medicine, and my guidance counselor said, well, you can't do sports medicine. Like, what does sports medicine mean? Like, you have to be a doctor, or you have to do this. I'm like, well, fine, I'm going to be a physio. And he actually told me, he was like, well, actually, you should probably go into something else, because it's hard to get into physio. So because he said that, I was like, I will show you, and I will get into physio. So I had no contingency plan. I had no backup plan. I was like, I will show him. And I also, when I was 17 years old, decided I was going to move out to Alberta to do my physio training for no other reason than I wanted to be in the mountains. And I heard they had a good sports medicine program, and that's why I ended up out there, and ended up falling in love with Alberta and the mountains, and stayed there for 11 years. So had some fantastic clinics out there, a really big sports medicine community in the knee injury prevention. We had lots of knees and shoulders, and they are world class, and had kind of submerged their world into the soccer kind of community. And we had some really strong relationships, and some of the orthopedic surgeons and the soccer coaches really trusted us with their athletes, and we were really privileged to work with some pretty cool people. And I had an incredible team out there that kind of pushed my limits and my knowledge base, and we kind of all grew together. And then the military base was just something so special. And yeah, then it brought me back home because my family's here. So then I came back to Kitchener-Waterloo area.
Yeah. And so you're into the outdoors as well a little bit.
Absolutely. I didn't know too much. I mean, I did Girl Guides and did little things here, but it wasn't until I moved out to Alberta that my world opened up to the outdoors. And my community there was just, I had some fantastic friends and just a brilliant network that just kind of introduced me to riding and to hiking. And I'm from Ontario, so our mountains aren't huge out here for skiing and snowboarding, so it was nothing that I was super excited about in the winter time. I did a lot of like snowshoeing and cross-country skiing, but the mountains in the summer was just where I loved to be, and we did so many little backcountry and front country treks, and yeah, that's where I love to be.
Well, and that's one of the things. You can't live, or spend time in the mountains without having to get in shape, right? Because anywhere you go, you're like out of breath.
Absolutely.
Right? Everywhere is either up or down.
It's true.
Yeah. So unless you just want to go be a spectator, like you drive in and then you go to each of the little roadside like viewing platforms.
Take your pictures. And
unless that's what you're doing,
yeah,
you better get your ass in shape or you're going to be miserable.
That's the thing. But the neat part is the scenery and how stunningly beautiful it is and how active everyone else is. You kind of just get in shape by accident because you don't want to not do it with people. And so I didn't realize how, like, even looking back at some of my picture books, like I didn't realize how like cut certain people were because we just always were out doing things, whether it was we were hiking or we were throwing like boats in the water and going out kayaking or canoeing. It was just always something. It was just our life. Like it's just what you did out there. It was wonderful.
Yeah. So bring it back to sort of our listeners because, we tend to be, with a part-time adventure podcast. And the idea is trying to sort of open up the world of adventure to not the pros, not the van life people that are living in mountain towns already, but just the average people who, because I think, and this is sort of the gist of what we do, but like people who are exposed to those adventures, whether, it's backpacking and canoeing and climbing and hiking and mountain biking and, whatever your adventure is, it makes your life better.
Yeah.
Right. So, what we're looking at is the idea of how do we then on the physical side, because, we're always talking about how to do things, and sort of the why and the philosophy and what you get out of it and how it makes your life better. But from a physical standpoint, like, what would you say are like the key things that people should be focusing on to enjoy their things better, reduce the chance of injuries?
So it's really interesting because when I was so submerged in knee injury prevention and so there's a major ligament in the knee and it causes 80% of our knee joint stability. So when athletes lose that stability, that's a huge part that will take them out of sport. And so there's all this research that came out in kind of 2012, 2013, where they worked on the knee injury prevention programs to say, you know what, let's keep athletes in sport. When we started delving into that and really getting into that with our athletes, we go out to the teams and teach them. It was really cool because that research, as much as it was focused on 14 to 19-year-old girls, it translated over into everything. And so if we could teach those principles on movement mechanics and how to teach people how to move correctly and move better, move efficiently, move stronger, it actually allowed them to do things more throughout their day. And then they were less injured throughout their day, which took them into their weekend, which then if we taught them how to work through their weekend of hiking and biking or whatever they decided, they're camping, those movement principles just translated right over into things. And so they were able to do life and just use the movement principles. So our knee injury prevention and the fitness strategies and the strength training strategies allowed them to then, we could carry those principles not just from soccer, but into hikers, into our climbers, where we just taught them how to move. So the strength training principles of our core and our base strength through our hips and our movement strategies, where we taught our athletes how to move with their knees, carried over into the hiking mechanics or the biking mechanics or the everything.
So listen, you did a body scan
I did.
on me, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I thought it was a way of telling me what I don't know about my body. So can you explain what that is in detail and why people should consider it?
So it came out of principles that came from when my work with the military base, and one of the senior officers was doing his master's program. And his base philosophy was, we put so much, preventative stuff into our tanks, and we have these 13-page documents with, what is going to break down eventually and what's not going to break down. And we go through that with our tanks, but we don't invest in our most our biggest assets, which are our soldiers. And so we want to go through these fitness evaluations to do the exact same thing. So you'll take your car through a maintenance thing and say, okay, well, let's take it through everything. Well, let's take our soldiers through the exact same thing. And so that's what the body scan was for you, is I took his principles and essentially used a lot of his testing and said, okay, let's look at how your upper body moves. Let's look at how your lower body moves. Let's look at how your trunk moves. And now let's look at the strength components of your upper body and your lower body. Let's compare left to right. Because a lot of principles and a lot of strength training, we do two-legged. And we need a baseline strength. But sport is one-legged. You're not climbing on a wall on two legs. You're climbing one and then the other. You're not hiking up a hill on two legs. You're not hopping up. You need one leg and then the other. Well, if one is deficient and you're relying so much on the other, is one going to overtake all the stress and then the other one comes along, or is the other one more predisposed? You have less stability. But until you actually push it to endurance limits or push it to different lengths that you're going to reach to or strengths that you're going to reach, you're not going to ever pick it out. And so we went through this 24-stage testing to see what your left and right looks like, what your upper and lower looks like, and what your trunk looks like.
So this is a perfect time to say, I know that myself, my right leg's got osteoarthritis stage 4, stage 2 in the left. I'm slightly, I had an impingement in my left shoulder. That's what I know about my body.
Yeah.
That's me. Can you recall or take a look at my report? And because we've got the results right here, and just share with the listeners, what else do you see?
So
and by the way, we can take the time for you to actually look at it.
No, I did. Yeah, I did.
But then just talk, because I'm curious to see what I didn't know.
So your left side, especially because the arms are not independent of the legs. The arms are not independent of the core. So if you're going up on the wall and you need to reach with your left arm, you still need to engage lats. You still need to engage that side body core. And so when on one of the testing, I asked you to hold your whole body weight on your left side and reach as far as you can with your right arm. Your left side was substantially weaker. And so it matches that your left shoulder was bothering you more because you were unable to support your body weight and reach. So then let's say you're up on the wall and your left shoulder isn't holding you. Well, you may not have as far as a reach on your right side when you're trying to do that thing, or when you're trying to reach for a certain hold. Your left core, when we did a side plank hold. So we know that side-to-side difference, if there's more than a 70, or if there's a side-to-side difference and you can't hold a side plank for more than 70 seconds, it's associated with low back injury or low back pain. Well, you couldn't hold close to a 70-second hold on that left side, and it was substantially less than your right side. So again, that's matching that whole left-sided issue with it. Now, we know your right side has more arthritis in it. Doesn't necessarily, just because it's documented on imaging, doesn't necessarily translate to function. We have patients who come in with awful x-rays, and yet they're not even close to painful or just like a 1 on 10, 2 on 10. So you may move better on your right side. Your whole right core side may be stabilizing and moving a little bit better. And there's just so many different reasons
That's
that the
odd.
arthritis can
I would
be.
have thought that my right side was weaker than my left, because at one point my legs were anyway.
Yeah, and so your right side, your right and left, when you stood on them, were actually fairly symmetrical, except when you were standing on your right hand side and you reached behind to the left, like behind that right side with your left leg. That was the only one, and it wasn't anything substantial. But it was more your left-sided weakness, which then you may be overdoing things on your right to try and protect or move differently around that right side. So that's just kind of some of those indications that have come out. Your lumbar spine and your mobility, like your flexibility is there in your body. You just don't have the strength to control it. So
the strength is the biggest issue.
Your strength is huge on you. It's not necessarily that you can't move there. You passively could move there. I could move you there.
Yeah.
You can't control there or get there yourself.
Okay.
And that's a difference. So that's where a lot of our sport deficits come, is people will go to yoga or do all this stretching, which is fantastic, but we need to strengthen in those ranges, and that's what gets us into our functional kind of training or sport specific training, is we need to be able to train in the ranges that you need to get to.
Okay. So what you saw is what you expected?
It matched your story.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of surprised me, because I would have thought if anything was to be weaker, it would have been my right side, considering all the injuries I have.
Yeah, a lot of
my
times
ankle, my legs, my
the
knees.
the injury side or the painful side isn't necessarily the deficit that we find. We find that the left doesn't move as well or isn't as controlled as well, and so the other side may have to move more, may have to take up more, be in awkward positions because you can't do it on the one side.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and I guess when we're talking imbalances, then, one of the takeaways, I guess, that people at home can, run with themselves is squat, deadlift, bench press. Those things, they're all great exercises if done properly.
Yeah.
But you need unilateral work.
Huge.
Right? Like basically one arm, one leg, so whether say on the lower body, it's a, one-legged Romanian deadlift, right? Because your hips have to brace and stabilize.
Yeah.
It's just on one foot. One-legged box squat, Bulgarian split squats.
Yeah, those are hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and then if we want to take and get sort of that cross-linking through the core, one-handed carries.
Yeah.
So if you do whether it's a waiter's lunge or a waiter's walk, just like a waiter would hold a tray over their head, hold a weight in one hand, and now whether you walk with it or you lunge with it, or something, basically where now your body has to stabilize. It's the same thing, like the QL, like the muscle over your kidneys, essentially.
Yeah.
If you do a one-handed farmer's walk, it engages, where if you have even weight in each hand, it doesn't have to stabilize, so it doesn't engage.
It doesn't. And when you're in variable situations like hiking, like climbing, where you need those variables, like those muscles to come on, you need to train that way. I'm not saying, you'll see some crazy functional exercises where people are on one leg on a Bosu ball throwing things. That's not it. That's not what we mean. But what we know is, so let's say I'm getting someone back to running. Okay. And their running is, they kind of tell us that you should be able to single leg squat with half your body weight on a bar, controlled, in order to be able to run. That's kind of the demand. So you should be able to squat 1.5 times your body weight, essentially. So a body weight squat plus half your weight then I'm allowed to progress you to run. Well, think about kind of even just, I will take someone to that and then add that, because through hiking or climbing, different adventure sports, you need to do that over a long haul period of time, right? So I need you not to just be able to body weight squat or do a few things with body weight, but I need you to have load unilaterally, asymmetrically, on the same side, on the opposite side, because that's what happens when you step on a route. Can you control? Some of our knee injury prevention stuff, we were always like, oh, don't let that knee go in and drop in and come. Well, that might happen, right? You might step on a boulder and then your knee drop in. do you have the strength to pull yourself out, right? That's where a lot of times I'm not training people to drop their knee in and pull it out, but they sure as heck better have the control to do that, because that's where those injuries happen. It's in those unpredictable situations that you have to take them in, like the one arm overhead or the one arm out to the side or forward or what have you.
So when you gave me the exercises to address those issues, was that for backpacking mine? Was that for rock climbing? Or was that just to get those pieces back to normal? Like, I mean, I'm just wondering, what are the sports specific ones that I should focus on?
I don't think I had, this one is for backpacking, this one is for climbing in mind, as much as I want you to clean up this side.
Gotcha.
I want you to clean up this left side because it's going to transfer into both sport.
Yep.
I want you to fix your right-sided arm core movements. I want you to fix your left-sided leg core movement together. Like, we'll call that lumbo-pelvic control. So lumbar, pelvic, leg control. Kind of, your foot bone's connected to your head bone. Like, everything is a kinetic chain. So your foot, the knee's the dumb joint. It does whatever the foot and the hip tell it to do. So the knee will go if the foot's not in a good position or the hip's not in a good position, the knee takes it. So we have to make sure the core is in a good position, because if your body's in a trunk lean, the knee might drive in just to try and offset, to try and get gravity in a certain position. Like, we need to really be in a good position. And so training everything is just trying to make left and right equal each other is kind of where my goal was for your programming.
Cool. Are knees a big issue for backpackers?
Huge.
So what are the things, I know what I did, but I'm curious from your perspective, because I've been working with others as well. What should they be working on?
So it's more the mechanics of for the knees, because if they have foot issues, if they have hip issues, the knee kind of takes the brunt of everything. So you really want to make sure the hips are strong, the ankles are strong. And if they're not, using other devices like the orthotics might be something kind of we try and just do interim until we get into the strong mechanics of everything. But that full lower body, like we said, the RDLs, the single leg squats, the good mornings, for goodness sake, we still need to be able to hold our pack and get into certain positions. We need those single leg positions with it. But that full core single leg strength, base strength stuff, two-legged training is not bad. We still need a brute strength. We just need the single leg control as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I find we'll call it layman's approach, to coaching has always been, you kind of build a strength base with the basics, right? Like the squat, the deadlift,
Absolutely.
And then whether it's concurrent or sort of added on at a, in a periodized approach, then you take that strength and now teach people how to use it, right? Whether it's balanced movements, but it's not just sort of like you were saying, that Bosu ball stuff. It comes into the thing, like, that's not how you balance in the real world.
No.
It's getting everything to fire in a coordinated manner. Like, and you'll probably run into this, like, a lot of people have shitty, if you want to call it, mind-muscle connection with their ass.
I love that you're talking about this, yeah.
Where the number of people where it's like the brain can't fire the glutes. And once they start to, whether it's, some, just even warm-up drills.
Yeah, we did a really cool exercise where we were squatting, I think, was it 80% of our maximum weight, 10 sets of 10? What was it?
That was about 75, and that was horrible.
75%. It was horrible? Well, the reason why I was actually, for me, I was in awe was that at the beginning, it was super hard.
Yeah.
Because anything over 5 for us in strength training is cardio. You're huffing and puffing. And you're like, fuck, I know this is only 75%, but man, because that's all we do is up to 5, right? We're up to 10. Anyways, but at the end, as soon as I hit about 5 sets, it was getting easier and easier and easier. So that's why,
right?
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, even though you're getting more tired, you're getting more skilled. Yeah. Right? And the brain goes, oh, shit, I got this figured out. And now the chain is firing in the right order.
Yeah.
and that's sort of where the magic comes in.
It was truly magical. Like, I thought that was really fascinating.
The nervous system, that's it. Like a lot of our training is nervous system changes. Like the first few times you start getting stronger or better, it's not like you're injecting strength into you at that point.
Right.
But you're getting stronger because the nervous system is firing on better. It's waking up. There is a huge stop between that brain and the muscle. And when you wake it up, it's gold. It's just such a way to prevent injuries. It's just such a way to keep you stronger. And injuries happen when you start getting fatigued. Well, if you're more efficient with every time you stride, your knees in a better position because your glutes are firing. Those are endurance muscles. Glutes are power endurance. Your quads are your explosive power, but they fatigue out. So if you're using glutes, they'll last a whole lot longer. Then each climb that you do is just a little bit better, and you can sustain it longer, so you're less likely to get injured because you're always going to be in a better position.
I thought it was interesting when you said to me that men and women are different. Women are quad dominant, so their glutes are massively weak, and that's what I need to work on, whereas men, it's the reverse.
Yeah, so females have wide hips. Our knees come in. We have wide hips for childbearing purposes. It's evolutionary. It's science. It's there. Because our hips are wide, our knees come in, just biomechanics wise, we are set up to be kind of anterior translators when we squat. So we tend to be knee squatters. We tend to drive forward, and the EMG studies are there. We tend to fire quads first. Guys have high hips. They kind of get into that bow-legged bulldog position, and they fire back body. They fire glutes and hammies first. That's more protective. When your knee is in a position, and if you look at a traditional female physique and our knees go are from our hips, the angle in, the knees are almost in that knock-kneed position. If you leave them there, but then you don't change the knee position, you just fire on the glutes, it actually moves the knees out into that bow-legged position. You're automatically taking the stress off the kind of inside part of the knee, the part that will fail, that will have tissue failure, and that's where injuries happen. So guys are just set up to be more injury preventative. The female athletes are 3 to 9 times more likely to injure our knees than our male counterparts, just because of our basic anatomy. Plus, you guys have testosterone, so you're 33% stronger. It's a basic science fact. I remember in high school being like, that is bull. I do not believe they're stronger. It's a fact. They're stronger. But it's a thing that we can train our movement pattern. We just have to be good at it. Yeah. And then being good at our movement pattern when we're hiking. So when we're hiking and we're going downhill, push your knees out, drive through the heels. There's just a better way to do things.
I was consciously doing that.
I'm so proud of you.
But it's strange. Like I do feel that bow-legged happening just a little bit even when I'm going down the stairs. But it's it takes a lot of thought. How about you? Do you ever feel like your quads are weaker than your ass?
No, but you've seen my quads.
Yeah, it's got nice legs.
No, but basically, I know how to use my ass.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
like it fires.
Do you feel it when you hike? Up, down.
The only thing I run into that ever burns on me when I'm hiking is my calves. Like it's say going uphill.
Yeah.
Everything else is just dug. You know, like
But if you took a picture of your lower body and like Catherine, your lower body, you see the difference in the anatomy, in the basic structure. So every day you use your glutes and your hamstrings more than you do. And so then it's just set up that you're just using it all the time. So it's just basic endurance for you. We know that guys jump, run, cut, pivot with their butt. Females use their quads. We just have to train the pattern. You just have to work on training it. And then...
Well, this is actually good news for all the ladies out there, right? Because if you're having a predisposition to be quad dominant, and, you know, there definitely is ways to, like, activate those glutes, get them firing, make them way stronger. Because the glutes aren't just one muscle, right? Obviously, the glute maximus is sort of your you know, I'm trying to think of an analogy here. We'll call it the star, you know. It's the biggest muscle in the body. But, you know, when you're talking, you know, piriformis, glute medius, all of these other muscles in that hip structure that all work to externally rotate the hip and extend the hip. Now what you get is this, you make those big and strong, then you also look better in your yoga pants on Instagram.
Because you got bubble butt.
Yeah.
It's all about the butt.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that, it's funny because I'm not coming at it from an injury prevention standpoint, but in coaching, it's always come into a thing where powerful hip extension is better athletic performance.
Every time.
Right? And so even down to the point where, I developed a way to reposition people on a bicycle. So you were positioned a little further back. We bring the cleats back on the pedals if you have clip-in pedals. So there's more hamstring and glute activation because pedaling a bicycle is a hip extension and a knee extension. Generally, there isn't a whole lot of movement in the ankle. It's basically just a stabilizer as far as the up and down goes, unless you're some of those weird, people that drop their heels a lot. But what you'll run into then is so many people, like if they're sort of zipping up a hill, even guys, it's the quads that blow up. Reposition on the bike so that now we're getting more glute and hamstring activation, and because the glute is just coming from the hip extension, and the hamstrings are going to come from the fact that then when you hit the bottom of the stroke, you wipe the dog poo off your shoe. Right now you're actually like pulling back, and because hamstrings and glutes when you're extending your hip kind of work together, because the hamstring works to bend the leg and it works to extend the hip, so kind of magic. But it's funny that just purely from a performance standpoint, like we came to this like many years ago, and it would probably explain why I've never had knee issues. Even though it wasn't specifically why I was trying to do it.
Yeah.
But the female athletes I coached, even ones doing triathlons, so they were doing a ton of running, which is terrible for you after a while. They didn't have knee issues either. So,
Interesting.
It's funny how you get to that stuff.
So is it logical that I would have a tight, because I haven't had this in the past, but more recently I'm noticing my piriformis muscle and my hips and basically my ass is tight. Yeah. Like sitting cross-legged and leaning forward. Usually my knees hurt, but then I discovered this is another big thing for my knees. Stretching. Yeah. Could not believe how it stopped the throbbing in my knees. Yay. That was crazy. Yay. And then, but now I do notice that I'm incredibly tight in the glute area. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, there can be lots of different reasons. It could be, but like honestly, you're starting to use them more, and you're starting to use those motor patterns more, right. Which is wonderful. But then you may still, when you start fatiguing, you're still going to rely back on your base motor pattern, which is going to be your basic structural anatomy. Gotcha. Okay. So you may still just rely on that, which gets you there. The stretching part just makes me happy because as soon as you get into that full joint range of motion, you're getting proper joint nutrition and you're just lubricating those joints properly. And if you can get the joint surfaces in contact with each other, you're getting joint pressure on all the joint, like on the articulate, like the cartilage surfaces, which is going to help make them just more healthy and robust. So the stretching is really good, but the hip tightening is probably more because you're using it and then just probably fatiguing out.
Yeah, Winston also often says it's because I've been sitting all day too.
Yeah,
but I have in the past. Like I've been doing this for over 20 years, right? Yeah. And I never had so much of that hip tightening in the past. Yeah. It's more recent.
Yeah, well, because if you think when you sit all the time, your hip is in a flexed position. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So therefore, like the psoas is going to be in a shortened state. Yeah. And because of the way, that's the hip flexor, the way it connects, it goes through and connects to your spine. Mm-hmm. Right. If in a shortened position, now it's pulling your lower back all the time.
But why is it that I'm all of a sudden experiencing this now? Is it because I'm in my 40s? Is that a factor into this?
That could be. Well, you know, and when you think about like the stuff we do,
yeah,
like
that's true. I mean, in the past 3 years, I'm way more active now.
Yeah,
we pretty much are active like maybe 4 or 5 times a week.
And you
plus walking plus.
And you're pushing your limits to certain, like every time you're talking, it's you're challenging yourself with new and like you're achieving new fitness goals. So then you're getting to another point and you're getting new climbing problems, and then you're able to get into a new strategy. And so it could just be the muscle fatigue too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look like certain exercises, like especially because you're getting better at firing the glutes.
Yeah.
You know, like when we'll do deadlifts, it's kind of like just as an overall, then doing sort of like the curled body back extensions. So they're taking the lumbar out of it.
Yeah.
And puts it really like your ass cramps when you do those. Right. And because we're doing with the foot in the flared position, then you're getting like the glute medius is like burning.
Yeah, my hamstrings, yeah.
You know, and then the hamstring, you know, so all of that stuff we're targeting more too.
Yeah.
And when you work something, it tightens. And so that's where all of your mobility work is to go, let's untighten this.
Yeah.
And your poor knees have taken the brunt of your activity for the last 20 years. So now you're giving it to your hips. So the knees aren't taking the load anymore. It's the hips. And
well, I'll be truthful in that. So 3 years ago, I couldn't walk down the stairs without holding the rail. So like I didn't have the strength. So that did improve dramatically.
Yeah.
But even the past year, and I had been doing a lot of backpacking with Winston and so forth. And this year we decided to take it easy because I was gearing up for the stem cell therapy in February.
Yeah.
And of course that means that for the next, I think it was 4 months, 5 months, or 6 months, you're not supposed to put too much impact on it. So you can give it time to heal and regenerate. But just before that, this past year, even months before the stem cell, this is why I decided to do it. My knees were acting up again, despite the fact that I had lost all this weight, that I was maybe because we had started rock climbing, we weren't consistently going to the gym strength training, like 5 days a week the way we were in the past. Right? Well, that's a big change, right? So maybe that did help quite a bit, but then I almost wondered, so that's what pushed me to try that.
Good.
And so that did help, the stem cell. The nutrition's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I can't even remember if we even talked about this on the air or not, but with the keto diet, it reduces your inflammation significantly. And that's just phenomenal because the food, there's a connection there. But I just wonder, I think age is probably a part of it, unfortunately.
I mean, we do know that our muscle tissue changes, right? So every decade we get older, more, you know, the white covering on steak, more of our tissue, like our muscle tissue that's juicy and elastic, then turns to kind of that connective tissue. So it just takes longer to recover. So you could have done whatever you wanted in your 20s, gone out for like a multi-day expedition, feel a little sore, but just recover quicker. It just takes longer to recover.
Gotcha.
Every decade we're older, we have essentially about 10% more fibrotic tissue than elastic component tissue. So sure, you know what? When you do go out and you're more active, it just may take a little bit longer for the muscles to recover too. And that's okay. It's one of those things that it's not going to change. We just have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
You know, like dogs, you see little dogs have little like naps and they just like lay there and then they get up and they run around. And then the older dogs, when they wake up after a nap, they stretch and they do their up dogs and down dogs. That's where you get the...
Yeah, that's what I do in the morning. Right? I get out of bed. I'm like, ooh, that's stiff.
But no one teaches them to do it. They just know they need to mobilize and stretch first. And little dogs don't need to. And it's just as we get older, that's just what we have to do.
That's what happens.
Yeah, I find like in the morning when I get out of bed,
you have a whole routine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically just kind of a movement flow.
Good.
Yeah.
And you go from like, oh, fuck, what happened to me? Like, while I slept to, I'm kind of bouncy. I'm feeling good. You know.
How long does it take you?
It's like 5-10 minutes.
Good for you.
That's impressive.
You know, but it's the same thing. Like, you see me when we get out of the car. Like, we went climbing today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, we look like old people.
yeah, so we were out rock climbing for 8 hours, and there's hiking, and there's the climbing, and but you're on your feet for 8 hours straight. We're out in the heat, probably getting a little dehydrated,
Sunburned,
yeah, all those types of things. And it was fine. Like, we walk back to the car, wait for the death oven, to cool itself down before we get in the car.
Right.
We go, I don't know, what did we drive? Maybe 10 minutes before we hit a store so we could get a drink.
Yeah.
I got out of the car and like my feet were killing me. My back. It's like, oh shit. Oh, like I'm walking along like little baby steps, like a little old man.
I know.
And after about 10 or 15 steps, it was like, oh, okay, I feel. But it was like just getting out of the car, like the bottom, the plantar region of my feet.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I've had plantar fasciitis. It wasn't that.
Yeah.
It was more the, oh, Jesus. But I wore climbing shoes for almost 8 hours.
Right.
Yeah, as you get older, you need to move more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like if you don't, you're not feeling well.
Well, exactly. Oh, exactly. And no one ever said you forever will be pain-free for the rest of your life. Like, no one gave us that card. There's never a rule that says it's going to be a thing. You just got to know how to manage it. So we know that the muscle tissue changes. So, we got to move a little bit. And it makes sense that when your feet are cramped up in those little, like, too small climbing shoes, because that's how you climb, that they should have less blood flow than regular. And now the tissue is different. So if you were 20 versus if you're 40, you're going to have less blood flow to those muscles. So it takes a little bit more time to reperfuse, and that just be okay with it.
Yeah.
And as long as we know how to do it, we can still do everything that we should keep doing everything we should. I remember when I was on placement as a student, and I saw a little old man bend down in a deep squat, like butt to floor squat, and tie his shoes. He is 95 years old.
Wow.
I looked at him and he just looked at me, and it was just in his like Asian culture. And he's like, this is just how we bend down to do everything. He was 95 years old. And that was one of my first indications that just keep using it. Mm-hmm. Because when we stop using it, we're not going to be able to go butt to floor squat to tie our shoes when we're 95 years old if we stop doing it, Yeah,
I think that's a really good message because, like I said, my surgeon was telling me not to hike, not to strength train, the only things that I could be doing is cycling and swimming, which I like cycling, but to me it was boring at the time, right? I didn't want to just do that. So, I think that's a very strong public service announcement is you don't use it, you lose it.
You don't use it, you lose it. And you need to stress the body because the body's incredible. It adapts and it takes stress. And as long as we don't reach tissue tolerance, you stress it a little bit, let it recover. You stress it a little bit more, let it recover. And as long as you do it progressively, the body is resilient and it is adaptable and it will take on all the loads. You just got to be smart about it. If your knees are red hot, swollen all the time and you're just going to pound through like multiple day hikes and you don't listen to it, yes, it's going to fight back and win. But if you do it smartly the way you did it, that's the most evidence-informed way of managing it. The evidence supports weight management, strength training. Honestly, that's the biggest thing. Those are our biggest two tools for osteoarthritis management is strength training and weight loss. Think about your packs. When you're talking about a multi-day pack and you're talking about a difference of 6 pounds making such a big difference over that much time, if you can lose 10 pounds, think about how much difference 10 pounds in a pack makes over days.
Yeah.
Now you're doing that every single day. So taking that off your body every single day on those knees and then loading it even more with proper movement mechanics, it's huge.
What else are you a big fan of?
Strength training wise or just movement wise?
I mean, just in overall health and performance. What else do you think is important that backpackers, rock climbers should be looking at?
It's extremely multimodal is kind of my biggest deal. And what I'm learning more and more, the more I go into things, when I finished school, I thought I knew everything and I thought I could just, save the world with all of my knowledge that I learned in my 2.5 years at, after, because it's a, 4-year undergrad and then 2.5 years master's and you're just, so much, nothing. And the more I've learned is the more I don't know anything about your sports, right? So I feel like the more I learn, the more I ask more questions. And to understand how sleep is so beneficial and nutrition is so beneficial and strength training is so beneficial. I can't tell you how to climb better. I am not well versed in climbing mechanics, but I sure as heck can tell you how to strengthen and how to move more efficiently. So I've learned that if you teach me the skill set of what you need to climb, I can teach you how to be stronger and what muscles you need to develop or what movement mechanics you need to develop. And I think breaking down the movement mechanics is one of my biggest things I've learned over the last few years, is asking the how and the why. So you know your sport, I know how to move, let's work together and figure out how to make that the biggest team approach. And if you don't understand the mechanics of it, me checking my ego and talking to the coaches or talking to other professionals on how to get you moving better is one of my biggest things I've learned and one of my biggest proponents. I need to understand your world in order to help make it better. And then also understanding, like we were talking about before, there are ways to train for things that will make it part of your world. So instead of saying you need to do your exercises every single day and take 45 minutes out of your day, I don't have 45 minutes in my day every day sometimes to do exercises. So trying to work with everybody to try and interject it into your world to make it make sense. So people who want to train for, like we were talking about, the Ironman, but only have 6 hours a week, for people to figure out how to do that, how can you work with people so it makes it work in the world? And trying to kind of just make it work in their head makes, I don't know, it's just kind of making lifestyle, fitness a lifestyle, not just a thing that kind of is an add-on to the rest of your life.
That's a good point, because I was looking at what you gave me in the exercises, even for the first time that we met with the band. And between that plus what we do, and then the rock climbing and the kids, and it's like, how do I fit it all in, right? Because I don't do any of my core at home. I only go when I go to the gym.
Whereas and it's funny because we have these discussions because, like, I think things in the gym are things that, you know, like as far as us training together, there's no point in doing the things in the gym together that I can just do by myself at home, right?
Okay.
So most of my core work I do on my own.
Yeah.
Right? I might be listening to a podcast, whether, you know, and it's such a simple thing, you know, because we'll do like things that require equipment, you know, things like the Pal-Off press or something like that.
Yeah, so we do that all at the gym.
Yeah, but then I don't need the gym for side planks.
Right.
I don't need the gym for, you know, like Russian front planks or around the worlds or, you know, various sort of, you know, core stabilization exercises. I don't need it
I need
for...
to find a new gym partner that will help me with that.
I don't need it for, you know, but it's the same kind of thing.
I have no motivation to do that at home. The only thing I do at home is hiking with a weighted vest in the morning.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
I do a fasted hike.
And that's slowly becoming a habit. And then once that's a habit, then you start developing a new habit.
Yeah.
Right? Because like the ab thing, like I just train, you know, one day it's leg raises and side planks. Then the next day, you know, it's dead bugs and like front planks. And I do that 6 days a week.
Awesome.
Right? And it takes 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Listen, I might.
When you say it over, I never see you do that in the morning. Or when we go camping.
No. Well, basically, because it's breaking my routine.
Okay.
Right? Because it's the same thing with my morning flow to get moving. You know, I'll do a few squats here, whatever, but it's like when I'm getting out of my own bed, there's like just and then I do this, and then I do this, and then, you know, it's like, it's a habit.
It's a habit. Gotcha.
You know, so.
And it's my favorite because you're making it consistent, right? Yeah. So how do you know how many times you're supposed to work out till you're fit? Or how many times do you have to eat a healthy meal before you're qualified as healthy? There's no standard that says you eat 15 healthy meals and now you're qualified as healthy. It's just keep eating healthy, right? How many times is good enough to brush your teeth? I don't know. You just keep doing it. You know, it's just the consistency. How do you know that you're strong on the wall when you're climbing? When are you an expert climber? I don't know. It just kind of happened because I just kept being consistent with it. My tendons started accommodating. My motor patterns started accommodating. It's the consistency with it and just making sure that it happens every single day. Then you start to become fit. Then you start to become healthy. And you just you don't reach a plateau. You just keep getting better, but it's just smaller incremental changes. And it's sometimes that's one of the biggest barriers is you don't see as big of fitness changes. But, you know, if you stop doing it, you lose it really quickly, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, no, what do you think of this idea? Because like one of the things that I've kind of stressed to people, like because there's one thing about training elite level athletes, right? You've got to dot every I, cross every T, you know, get magic potions, you know, and I'm not talking steroids, but you know, but the whole concept is that because they're so close to their genetic potential, then to get any more improvement, you have to do everything exactly right, right? But for most people, we're not elite athletes.
right.
And I've always stressed sort of just two principles to pay attention to. Consistency, which you talked about, and progressive overload. If you just, you know, try to do a little bit more next week than you did this week, and you're consistent enough to have a repeat stimulus, if that's all you do, like as far as fancy programming, you'll go really far.
You'll go really far. And you just best yourself just a little bit. And best yourself in all aspects, right? Best yourself in your water intake, in your sleep, making sure you're getting...
How many hours of sleep?
So my world has changed since learning the sleep science, like Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, that book, and it's just honestly revolutionized my life. So I used to be that like, oh, I can get by on like 4.5 or 5 hours of sleep and I'm so great. It's brutal and there's so much bad things with it. So I'm very hard on myself with trying to at least get my 7.5 hours, but I really try and do my 8.
I hear you. I actually sleep with a night mask now and that makes
Good
a
for
world
you.
of difference. It really does. Yeah.
It really has changed my world and everything's better. Everything is better when you get that sleep. You're more productive, you're more alert, you're more awake, your life is better, you know, your performance is better.
So we were talking about Ben Greenfield earlier and he was talking about heart rate variability. So stress, you know, whether it be the electrodes or electrical currents, but even just in terms of your current lifestyle and whether it be emotional or situational or whatever, getting rid of that reptilian brain, but actually having something measuring that. Have you ever looked into that?
By virtue of like blood testing or
no,
heart
more
rates?
heart rate variability. And do you have any thoughts about opinions on that?
One of my biggest things is I know stress is an evil poison and toxin, and it can just wreak havoc on so many different systems physiologically, whether it be the musculoskeletal system or, you know, your cardiovascular system or what have you. There's certain things that you can change and there's certain things you can't. Stress is something that you can't always change in your life. You can't change life events. You can't change what has happened, but you can change all the other things around. Knowing that stress is such a negative contributor to even healing processes. So you talk about inflammation and wreaking havoc in your joints, trying to mitigate that. Well, if there's with stress, there's the stress hormone flooding through your body, the cortisol. We know that if I do a pressure pain threshold, so I press on something on you and you register that pressure that I'm pushing as a 2/10 pain, if I can press with the same amount of pressure, but they have now underlying cortisol flooding through your system, so the stress hormone, you will register it as a 6/10 pain. There's essentially a 3-fold increase in your pain response. You can't change that, but you can know about it. So knowing that sleep helps decrease that, nutrition can help decrease that, exercise can help mitigate that. You can't change stress. You know that life happens, but you know that you also have all the tools to recognize, hey, this is a really crappy time in my life right now. I'm going to make time to go out and get to the gym. I'm going to make time to make sure I eat well. I'm going to make time. You know what? I know I should probably do my laundry and get my kitchen cleaned, but if I can get 8 hours of sleep tonight, my world is going to be better. My knees might be less sore tomorrow. And I know it has something to do with the fact that X, Y, and Z are happening in my life right now.
Well, and I guess the difference between sort of like acute stress, like obviously if say somebody dies, it's gonna be overwhelming, versus that low grade, just modern anxiety bullshit. You know, what do you think about like the ways that people can sort of turn down the noise essentially? Because
take a walk in the forest.
But that idea, because I think like when something bad, like when somebody punches you in the face, you know it, right? But when somebody is like drip by drip poisoning you with arsenic, you don't notice it.
You have no idea,
right?
Yeah.
And I think it's almost more insidious because you know, like a lot of the data, because you know when you're not getting, you know, it ties to sleep and food and all these things. But when your insulin variability is like all over the place, you have more inflammation, you know, increased risk of all sorts of things from like weight gain to cancer to, you know. So the idea of like, how do we get people to downregulate a lot of the like the little like that undertone of stress versus the big life events that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, sometimes it's needing to take a step back and doing a full lifestyle assessment. Like, what are my daily habits? What are things that I'm doing well? That mindfulness, the meditation, that might not be your thing, but there is so much science behind taking, whether you can meditate for 5 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 minutes, all the little apps that there are available, and how the breathing exercises can help. So there's two different nervous systems in your body, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic calms your system. Well, breathing helps stimulate that, which then will help downregulate any of those underlying, like, okay, I'm always feeling anxious. I'm always feeling, my mind doesn't stop spinning. When I try and lay down, I can't go to sleep because I'm thinking of all of these things that I need to do tomorrow or the next day. Sometimes basic breathing exercises is enough to do that with it. But sometimes it's needing to step back and writing out, you know, this is what I'm going to do for myself, and this is how I'm going to affect my sleep, or this is what I'm going to do for myself, and writing it out, because we know writing it out actually makes our goals happen. Sometimes just saying it and spinning it in your head, there's no action plans happening. But if you can sit down with a piece of paper and start your short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, it happens. And then when you get to stroke it out, like, I did that. I got to the gym 4 times this week, or I did my exercise program at home 3 times a week.
Right.
That made a huge difference. That satisfaction then starts releasing that dopamine into your system, which then helps. Like, the nervous system is cool because then that starts calming everything else down with it. And it's just a huge cascade effect. But if we have this underlying chronic gross stress in your body, you're not going to sleep well. We know a decrease in sleep starts making you, one, increase your hunger hormone, and then decrease the hormone that makes you feel satiated, makes you feel full. So now you start eating more, and then eating bad things, because now you're going to tend to go towards the carbohydrates instead of the like energy dense foods, and you're making poor choices when you're sleep deprived. And like, there's just a whole physiological cascade of things that stress, undersleep, you know, not doing things for your body, then you're more fatigued, so you're not going to do the things for yourself. You kind of have to have this holistic approach of step back. What's my action plan? What are my main goals? And what are the little steps in order for me to get there? Because little things make the biggest difference. Don't say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this 96K trek over 2 days and it's going to be incredible. Like, what am I going to do today that's going to make me better tomorrow? What can I do tomorrow that's going to be better in 2 days? You know, like, what are the little steps to get me to my big steps, and kind of breaking it down. And that's what I was talking about even with physio is, well, what are the little things in your sport that I need you to do so you can do your big sport? So if you need to be on the wall for X amount, why can't you be on the wall? So what are the movement components of you being on the wall that are missing? Okay, so then it's those movement mechanics that I have to figure out the function or the structure that's not functioning. And those are the kind of things that we just apply to everyday life. What's my big goal? What are the little things that are going to get me there? And then what are the little things every single day that I can do to make those medium things happen that are going to make me get to my big goal? It's kind of stepping back and kind of going a backwards approach.
I can't say enough about, at least for me, the keto diet, what it's done. And maybe other diets can do the same. But I've been on Weight Watchers before, and that's a different approach too. But that's more about calorie intake and its points. And but this is really revolutionary for me because it's about carbs and sugar.
Good
right?
For
And
you.
I've completely reduced it down to maybe 20, 25 grams a day. And being well rested when I wake up in the morning, to no cravings, zero. And I used to be that closet eater.
Yep. It's
You know?
fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's different, right? So everybody's gut biome is different and
Yes.
how their physiology. So maybe the keto has just matched your fitness style.
I can't see myself going back.
Right.
Like, even in terms, we talked about the reduction in inflammation, but the hormone, they say that it adjusts your hormones. Like the idea of less anxiousness, like I feel more zen.
It's so cool.
Yeah, I think that's, and going back to, which then you start to look at your life at what else can you do, you know, to take better care of yourself.
And some people go on keto and feel awful. Like it's just
Do
not
they?
for
Yeah.
them. And so for you, you've matched something. But that's one of the biggest take homes is maybe not keto might be perfect for your body type.
Right.
Might not be perfect for mine. I might feel super fatigued and lethargic. Cool. I've tried it. It's not for me. I'm going to try something else. But you found something that works.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things. There's no recipe card.
So we also did my DNA
Awesome.
testing. I've done that. And I think when we uploaded the results to another website, it talked about things that were noteworthy, which included over and over again, it talked about, I'm not sure what kind of short tails. It's the telomeres, which is basically the gene that that reproduces. So the idea of regeneration of your cells, right? And they talked about a diet that's high in fats, high in protein, basically low in carbs and sugar. So basically the keto diet
That's
seemed
fantastic.
to align with that.
Well, and I wonder, one of the things, and maybe you can speak to this, because I wonder how much Catherine's benefit she's seeing is the ketogenic diet specifically, or it's the fact that any diet that has you get rid of sugar, wheat products, it's not specifically the fact that there's no carbs. She's running pretty close to no carbs, but it's that to get there, then you have to get rid of all the shit. It'd be an interesting experiment, like if they were to compare like a keto diet to a diet where there's still, you might have some fruit or,
That's true. You bring the fruits back in.
Some type of carbohydrate, but no processed food.
The processed food is just evil.
I've done that in the past though, on the Weight Watchers, because I was too lazy to count points. So I only counted the whole, like unless it was processed. If it was processed, I had to count it. So I can't say I hardly did that because I had my cereal in the morning, right? And that's processed. But that was it. I did not have bread or rice or potatoes with my meals, like for dinner, and my lunch was always leftover. So the only processed food I had in the morning, were in the mornings, which was my cereal.
But then what about all of your eating that you didn't report?
No, at that time I lost weight. I wasn't eating sweets. Like I was really, but I didn't notice the feelings that I notice now. Like the way I feel now is completely different. Mind you, my arthritis, right? Osteoarthritis is way worse now than it was back then, right?
Yeah, and our bodies change.
That was about 10 years difference. So,
I mean, nutrition is it's so important and it's so key. And I am not even close to an expert, and like dietitians know so much more. But what I do know is that when people are good to themselves and they're eating well, their recovery is so much better. So if I have someone who's ready to go for surgery, one of my biggest chats is if we don't have a good, healthy diet going on, you are going to a dietitian, because the only way to maximize our rehab potential is we are what we eat. So you put in good things into your body's going to use that to repair the cells and the tissue. When you go out on a major hike and you have essentially destroyed all the muscle fibers, and we need to repair them so you're good for the next day, you better be putting good things into your body so that the body has absolutely perfect, opportunity to get as good as it can. And if we're putting, sugar and processed foods, high sugary drinks, then there's no way to recover the way we can.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
So backpacking.
Yeah.
Because what people love about backpacking is all the chocolate and candy. I've been up that hill, trudging up it, and I was eating a protein bar, and it did absolutely nothing for me. And
but when she starts eating Skittles, it's like, oh, I feel great.
And then you're like taking off. So let's talk about that, because I then wondered. I did go backpacking on the keto diet, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But I wasn't doing any high endurance sports. I was with my kids. So you are sweating buckets. Yeah. You're carting around that backpack, going up that hill, doing 2,000 feet a day. Yeah. What kind of food is going to help you recover? And can you avoid, and does that mean not having the sugar?
So you want, when you're in the high intense event, the energy snacks or whatever it is at that point, some people will even take like potatoes with them and eat potatoes. You need the quick energy if you're bonking, right? So if you're losing your energy and you just feel yourself flatlining, you need to get something into you quick that the body will use right away. So that's your sugars. That's your bee stingers, that's your like gels if you need them, because it's just so quickly absorbed and so quickly used.
But you prefer those over candy?
I love the bee stingers. Those are my favorites. Gels I cannot deal with, but the bee stingers I love.
Okay.
And I'll use those every time. There's a funny story that I was like doing some river crossing right before we went over this one. Essentially before we got to the Chilkoot Pass, and I was just grumpy, and I was like, I got stuck on it, and my best friend turned around and she shoved some bee stingers in my mouth because I started crying, and she's like, eat these. And it was like instant perfect. I got to the finish and I got to where we were snacking, but over the long haul, the high dense, high fat food is going to give you energy for longer. It's just not as readily available.
Gotcha.
So if you can keep it in your system and eat heavy, high dense, high fat foods, it's going to give you longer sustainable energy. It's if you have to go up a peak or if you have to be explosive that you might need the extra boost from the like simple carbohydrate stuff.
So what I discovered was canned cod.
Okay.
Tuna pate. Like all that had, good amounts of fat.
Yeah.
I just started eating pork rinds. That's what I brought out tonight.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good. They're like chips, but it's all pure pork fat that's been fried.
Well, yeah, because it's like half fat, half protein.
Pretty much. Yeah. So are those some good sources? Like, do you think that makes sense? Like, cod's in oil and you're drinking the oil. And
absolutely, because it'll just stay in your system longer. So it takes your body longer to process.
It's actually good, by the way.
Yeah, and it's better for you. Plus, that's super portable. So when you are on day-long, multi-day trips, that's easy to take with you.
Well, and the thing you'll run into when you're on a higher fat diet and you become fat adapted, basically aerobic activity. So as long as you don't redline, so you're completely gassed or you're doing anything super explosive or powerful, because that uses glycogen. And obviously if you're not getting much carbohydrate in, then there's going to be a certain amount of glycogen made by your body breaking amino acids down and turning it into, glucose. But otherwise, because your insulin levels are always going to be down, then what's the opposite hormone of insulin? I'm having a brain fart. There's insulin, which is moderates your blood sugar.
Yeah. Right.
And then there's the fat burning hormone. And if insulin's up, that one's down. It's funny how, most of the time that's always just in my head. But either way, kids, Google it at home. But it's the thing where if you've had a bunch of carbohydrate in your system, your insulin level's going to go up. And you can't burn fat when your insulin's up.
Yeah.
So as long as you don't spike your insulin and you're not trying to kick in the turbocharger.
Yeah.
To sprint to the top of that mountain, but it's like long and steady, your body can burn fat like crazy.
Well, And it's going to, like, now that you're on this keto diet, it's going to use your fat stores, and like you're in ketosis, so you're using your ketone bodies as energy stores. You're using that now. Your body knows how to process that.
Yeah.
Before, if you were just, primarily carbohydrates or a higher carb diet, your body uses that first. So that's what it knows during high performance. Well, now you're training high performance on a high fat diet. It's going to figure out how to use that energy source more efficiently and effectively. So you don't want to go to a high carb diet when you're out hiking if you've been training with the high fat diet. You don't want to change energy sources, especially in something like that. You want it to be used to whatever energy source you've been giving it.
Gotcha.
So it'll do better for you just to keep with the high fat when you're out there now, because that's what your body's used to.
And once the colder weather gets around, all you can do is take a popsicle stick, stick it on a stick of butter.
It is a beautiful peanut butter. Peanut butter is my I love that.
Oh, I made they're called fat bonds. They're basically brownies or fudge. Half of it's bacon fat. I have them in the fridge if you want to try them.
I would love to try one.
It's a bit salty. It's got a bit of a
it's like do you put a little bit of stevia in it with the cocoa powder?
It's not stevia, it's Swerve, but which is like xylitol.
Yeah.
Right? But there's quite a bit of that. There's 3 tablespoons, but anyway, I did a double batch and it's all in the fridge. Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, actually sometimes your dinner on the keto diet is to have 1 serving of that, and that is it. It's really weird. But you know what? Often you're not hungry.
That's so good.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the diet bit. So, Allison, is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners? What do you, as far as the messaging goes about what you do and what you want them to walk away with?
One of my biggest things is that we just don't stop moving. There's always something that we can modify. There's always something we can change, and there's always ways to get to the goals. The goals, if we have goals, we just have to break them down. And so if you're stuck with knowing how to get there, just, trying to break down the movement patterns. And if you're stuck with that, seeking any healthcare provider or professional that'll help you get there. But trying to break it down, there's always something we can do. Movement is key, in making movement part of our lifestyle.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. Our life is sedentary right now. We're in a world where everything is more accessible and it's more convenient, and that's not changing, which means we have to be better at being more active and finding ways to manufacture opportunities to find movement in our day and to putting it into our day, because it can be really easy to drive to work and sit for 8 hours a day, then come home and use all of the remotes so we don't even have to get up to turn the lights down or turn the radio on or any of it. And so to find ways to manufacture opportunities, and just because you're in pain, movement is actually going to help us get out of pain and to keep us active and to keep us moving. So you can do things for life. We just got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, because like I said, I went to my surgeon. He said to stop, and I hear so many people say that they've got injury, so they stop doing
If you stop, you die.
What? I've seen it.
The lions are going to catch up with you.
I've seen it with my mom, and she was even actually going through. She almost died, and she was in the hospital in intensive care unit for about a month, and she was bedridden. And then she had so much physiotherapy, she actually came out in better shape than she did even going in before she had her health issues. So that tells me, and I keep reminding her when she's not walking as much anymore and she loses her mobility, that she can get it back.
And we don't need it to be fancy. Keep it basic. Keep it simple. They don't do fancy physio in the hospital, but they do necessary in what they need. And she got out there because she moved. That's cool.
So now if people have listened and went, oh, okay, how do they get in touch with you, or where, if they want to get actually professional help?
Where am I at?
Yeah.
So I'm at Grand River Sports Medicine Center at the Cambridge location and at the downtown Kitchener location. So 16 Andrews Street in Kitchener or 40 George Street in Cambridge. I'm also on social media. The AC Gaudet is my Instagram. Alison Gaudet is Facebook.
We'll put them in the show notes too.
And Twitter is Ali Gaudet 11. And all 3 mediums are really easy to get a hold of me at.
So now the social media thing. So you've got the 3 of them. I got off. I guess I'm technically still on Twitter because I didn't cancel my account, but I don't go on Twitter. It's almost like on the positivity scale, Instagram's number one. Because I don't know what it is. Like I don't really see people shit talking and trolling on Instagram. Facebook is sort of, quite a ways down, and then Twitter's like a pile of turds that have been lit on fire. Is that your same sort of experience with the mediums?
So Twitter is my way. There's a lot of more academic reasons I go on there. A lot of papers are on there, or actually a lot of not necessarily good banter, but there is some banter that happens. Twitter's very negative. You're right. And there's ways now. It's also very short form and harsh, right? Yeah. So you're limited with your characters. So I can fluff things up and say things to you really nicely, or I can be more direct, and via texting that can just sound harsh and evil. So some people get defensive just because it's a short form. But absolutely, Twitter is bananas with how evil it can get, and how back and forth. Sometimes it's entertaining to just sit back and read the comments on there. But there is actually a lot of decent information coming out, or at least stuff that we can critically appraise and take a look at and be like, is that garbage? Is that not garbage? Instagram is stimulating your limbic system, right? So a picture's worth 1,000 words. You don't really need a lot of words in order to say whatever the picture says. You can also put filters on it and make it look prettier, so it makes it look better than what it is. And Facebook is kind of that in-between where people will rant and rant and rant, or say their big, long message, and put some pictures. So it's kind of a blend of all three, and I enjoy kind of the whole mix of each of them. But you're right, Twitter can be evil and awful, but it's got a lot of good papers or conference information, different things professionally for me come out there, and I like all the sports highlights on there too.
What are some good hashtags that you recommend people follow if they're interested in this topic?
So just injury prevention, knee injuries, even just like the keep moving, be active. As much as it's still a trendy, just overused functional fitness word, there are some actually really good exercises out there. Some people go over the top. Like I said, you need a base strength to stand on 2 feet. You can't put someone on a Bosu ball that can't even stand on 1 foot on base ground, but there are some good exercises out there with even just functional fitness, moving. And then the sport, like if you just search climbing, just search hiking, sometimes you'll get some really neat exercises just because of those.
Okay.
It's good. This has been wonderful.
So Allison, thank you very much for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
And we're gonna call it a night because it is
late.
late.
Dirty.
Yeah, she remembered. She remembered. It can't get any better. Catherine stuck my number 3 cam in a crack.
Oh,
so shame. Yes. So her first time.
Shame on you for making me for thinking that you could teach somebody on the ground and say, go do it. Go stick it in there.
Yeah, well,
okay.
So a blue number 3 is at Kelso. If you want it, go get it, because I can't.
Just use it as an anchor.
It's just a fixed anchor now. But she redeemed herself by remembering our tagline. So
there you go.
On that, we'll bid you all a good night.
Night.